You're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about their latest reads, views, and passions, alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I am your host, Emily Goodman, from the Office of Library and Information Services, and my pronouns are she, her. Let's dive in and discover who our guests are today.
I'm Bruce Schneier. I'm a security technologist. I teach at the Harvard Kennedy School and the University of Toronto, and I think a lot about security, society, AI, and democracy.
And I'm Nathan Sanders, he, him. Great to join you. I'm a data scientist based at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University, and I think a lot about how to help communities be more involved in policymaking, making the laws that govern all of us, especially vulnerable communities that haven't traditionally had a way to express their voice.
Thank you. So a little bit later in the show, we're going to talk to Nathan and Bruce about their newest book, Rewiring Democracy, how AI will transform our politics, government, and citizenship, which I'm very excited about. But first, we'll start off like we always do with what have you been reading?
So I've been thinking about this, and I wonder how many people answer the question about what they have been reading versus what they think they should be reading. I am actually reading a book called The Mechanic and the Luddite, a ruthless criticism of technology and capitalism, because I am interviewing the author, who is an Australian, when he's coming to the US for a conference next month. It is a really interesting take on society and the mechanisms by which it works that we all just take for granted and assume is the only way things work. And he really is engaging at that at a very deep level. Super interesting.
Wow. Is that something that you would have picked up if you had not been arranged to do this interview?
Maybe these are questions I am thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
and I ran across him before I was tasked with interviewing him. Maybe, probably.
Interesting. So if you weren't reading this, what is a genre that you might have picked up on your own?
So normally I read fiction. I read science fiction and fantasy, and the book I'm reading and that, which is much more relaxing, Robert Bennett has a really, really good series. I'm reading the second book. It's called A Drop of Corruption. Interesting characters, interesting plot, really interesting world building, fantasy murder mystery. Very good series, and I really do recommend that.
Cool.
And I'm kind of a disorganized reader. I'm always reading more than one thing at the same time, and I pick one thing up and I read it for an hour and I put it down and I pick something else up. So I'll give you two things that are on my shelf right now. One is a great history of science book that I've just really enjoyed. It's called Age of Wonder. The author is Richard Holmes. It's from several years ago, and it starts off going through the story of Banks, the English biologist that was on some of the voyages of Captain Cook that went all across the Pacific, and then goes into the story of William Herschel and his sister Caroline and the role that they together played in revolutionizing the way telescopes and optics are used in astronomy, and it's totally fascinating. He gets really into like the personal dynamic between the brother and the sister and how unique their relationship was and how it influenced the history of science. It's totally fascinating. And then I've also been reading a book that's sort of a memoir by my favorite artist who just passed away last year, which is David Lynch, the famed director. And he participated in a series of interviews that was collected into a book called Lynch on Lynch. It's him walking through every stage of his career, all the big projects he worked on, and sharing what he was thinking about at the time. That's been totally fascinating too. That's
cool. What have you learned about David Lynch that maybe you didn't know before you read that book?
Oh, great question. Some of the things that have really stuck with me is just how much struggle he went through as an artist. There was a period where he was just getting started making his first big movie, which was Eraserhead, a project that took years and years and went way over budget. And he had sort of friends and family just giving him a little bit of money at a time to keep him going. And he had no idea if he would be able to finish the project. He had no idea if anyone would watch it. And it ended up being a launching pad for the whole rest of his career and became kind of a cult classic and a great success for him. But that wasn't at all clear up all the way through the launch of the movie. So I found that to be kind of an inspiring lesson about persistence, perseverance through difficult times in your career.
Yeah, and almost an internal trust too, to trust that you know what you're doing and what you're working on is worth being put out there, even if, you're not sure how it's going to be received.
Well said.
I mean, I've been reading your book, so that's my nonfiction title. I don't often read a lot of nonfiction, though. Nathan, you may be interested. Last year, I read a book called The Light Eaters, which was written by a journalist compiling a lot of information over the years from biology and sort of plant studies about how plants take in information, both like biological information, but also what we think about in terms of like plants having cognition and the way that plants will grow and communicate to each other in order to sort of survive themselves, but also for the community to survive that they're in. Thinking a lot about like the book that was really popular a few years ago about the secret language of trees and that kind of thing. That was fascinating. I thought that was really good. But I'm much more of a sort of fiction romance novel person. So I just read a historical fiction title called The Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies about two women who are about 40 years old in like Victorian era. So neither of them are wed. They're sort of the outcasts of their family. Their brother is getting married and is taking over the family homestead where these two have lived for a long time. And one of them is like much more sort of progressive and rebukes the expectations of society. And so they get up to all kinds of hijinks trying to save the other women that are in bad situations or other ignored factions of society, alongside a highwayman ruffian who was part of their society but got outcast 20 years ago when he killed a man in a duel. And so now he's been on the run from the law, and they meet up, and of course there's romance and all of that good stuff. It was an absolutely beautiful and uplifting story, even though it was a little bit crazy. So that's what I've been reading, which has been
So
good
let me
fun.
ask you about. I've been reading a bunch about plant communication and plant society, and that plants
Yeah.
are actually more intelligent than we give them credit for. My worry is there's no place left to go after vegetarianism.
Mm, yeah. So this book did not necessarily say we shouldn't be eating plants because they are cognitive in the way that animals are. It also doesn't necessarily argue for vegetarianism. But I did have a few moments while reading this book where I was like, oh, now I feel bad. Like there's a scene where they talk about the smell of when people are cutting grass. The smell that you smell of cut grass is actually like the stress hormones that grass is putting off because it is essentially being killed. And that really wrecked me for a moment where I was like, oh no, these poor plants, and if I can't eat plants and I can't eat animals, what can I eat? And so that's they do address that at the end of the story about like that's not the point, and this is just really about changing our perspective of what does it mean to have cognition, and it might be more broad than we think that it is, the way that we sort of center human cognition. So
All
there's
right, so I have a
different types
song
of cognition.
recommendation for you.
Oh,
I have a
great.
song recommendation. Okay, so the Arrogant Worms. The song is
Okay.
"I've Heard the Screams of the Vegetables." After this is over, go listen to it.
Great, great. Yeah, I was talking to one of my colleagues about this book, and she sent me a video, an animated video that somebody made of leaves in the fall falling off of the trees and how wonderful we think it is. But internally, they're all screaming and like their friends are dying and falling away, and they don't know what's happening. And I was like, "Yep, that's about as terrible as this book felt to read. At some points, it was also extremely fascinating. So I do recommend it. Yeah. So on that note, what have you both been watching that's been piquing your interest?
So I have probably not watched anything in years, maybe
Mm,
decades. I'm just not. I don't go to movies. I don't. I haven't owned a television in my adult life,
wow.
so I haven't watched anything.
Okay.
Bruce, what's the last movie you saw?
The last movie I saw, God, it might have been one of the Lord of the Rings movies because I did
Wow.
go see
Okay.
those. But I did see one of the Iron Man movies, maybe the first one. So I couldn't
Mm,
even tell you what years these are.
interesting. I'm really fascinated by living in a house without a TV. In a good way. I like that.
It makes me a freak, but highly productive.
Mm.
Bruce, my recommendation to you is you should watch the new trailer that came out for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey movie, which I think is such a compelling reproduction of the story of the Trojan horse, and I wonder if you'll be able to resist wanting to see it in the theaters.
I'll definitely resist being able to see the movie just because I don't even know how to see movies anymore. But I do watch trailers sometimes, and I guess I
Okay.
watch short video things. I'll watch lectures that I can't attend. I don't really count that.
Mm.
Well, my response will be different. I worked in the film industry for several years at a couple different film studios, so we try and patronize the theater as much as we can, and our kids love it too. But the most recent movie I saw was at home on streaming. I had never seen Zero Dark 30, the movie that's sort of all about
Mm.
the hunt for Osama bin Laden and the American response to the war on terror. And I just saw it for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was a riveting watch. It's sort of interesting how it kind of depicts the ambiguity about the role of the CIA in all of this and whether what they were doing was productive or not. And although it did ultimately lead to the um, the assault on Bin Laden's compound, if what they did to get there and the elements of torture that were used in the CIA were actually causally responsible for what happened in the end. So I appreciated that depiction of the ambiguity, and I think it did a good job
Mm.
leaving the viewer with a sense of not knowing what mattered and what didn't.
Is it more of a documentary or closer to like a biopic sort of fictionalization of true events?
Much more fictionalized. It's probably closer to an action movie than it is to a documentary, which made
Okay.
for an interesting watch for sure.
Hmm. Is that like a style that you enjoy? Did you watch like Oppenheimer
Oh, I
when
did
that came
watch
out?
Oppenheimer. I saw that later as well, but I enjoyed that. I don't know if it's a style that I gravitate towards necessarily, but I enjoyed both of those
Mm.
two movies.
Yeah, I don't watch like any kind of, I would categorize it as a war movie, right? All of those kinds of political things. I don't tend to gravitate towards those. I think the last movie that I saw in theaters, I'm starting to get back into movies in theaters, was Ella McKay, which I'm not sure if the two of you have being more Boston based. Ella McKay was with Jamie Lee Curtis and I'm gonna forget the leading man, Harrison Ford. I
Harrison
forget.
Ford.
Yeah,
Harrison, yes.
thank you.
I did watch the
Um,
Star Wars movies in the
okay.
70s. I did see them.
70s.
Hi there, this is Editing Emily coming in with a point of clarification where in this segment we are talking about Harrison Ford. The movie Ella McKay actually stars Woody Harrelson. So as you're listening to this bit, just know that I made that mistake in our initial recording. My sincerest apologies to Woody Harrelson. So, modern day Harrison Ford is in this movie about like a young politician on the rise. She's a female. I forget who plays her. It's not Jamie Lee Curtis. Jamie Lee Curtis plays the aunt. But so she's on the rise in politics, and it's her sort of struggle of navigating some sort of bad press as she's trying to launch her career, but staying positive through it out. It ends up sort of happy, and the reason that I watched it in large part is because it was filmed all in and around Providence area. So they did a lot of the scenes at the state library and the state house. Um, and they took over a bar on Broadway and made it into the bar that her aunt works for or owns. And so it was a really good, like, feel good, this is my home kind of a movie. And afterwards, I told everybody that I knew that I watched it and that I loved it and that they should watch it too. And then a handful of people were like, I heard it was really bad, or like, I saw it and I didn't really think it was good. And I was like, oh, it scratched an itch in my book that I needed. And so, yeah, it's fun to see like a place that you love on screen, I think.
I love that feeling too. I have not seen Ellen McKay, but you're inspiring me to go see it.
It's sweet. You got to go into it just ready to take what it gives you and don't ask too much of it, I think.
I was at a friend's house a couple weeks ago, and there was a superhero movie on the screen, just someone else was watching it. And I was amazed how fake it all looked. It was live action, but it seemed like it was animation. I don't know. I think movies have amalgamated into real and fake being so intertwined that you just can't tell anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I saw the second installment of Wicked in the fall as well, and it's got that same feeling to it, Bruce, of like there are elements that are definitely live action and there are elements that are CGI, but all of it kind of has this cloud of fakeness to it. That's interesting. All right, so we can get into the main section of our podcast today, where we're going to talk about your book, Rewiring Democracy, and sort of your experience and thoughts on AI and the world, I guess. I'll state right at the top that I'm something of an AI cynic. I think this has been a breath of fresh air for me to read, thinking about the ways that I think I feel very negatively towards AI in the way that it is being promoted and operationalized here in America, and how it is the power is really concentrated in a select few at the very top. And so being able to think about how it might be able to be different either around the world or in the future has been really lovely. But before I sort of go on waxing poetic, I'm curious if you two want to talk about how you came together to write this book, what it's been like to write the book, and maybe give a quick summary of what people can expect if they read the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for focusing some of the discussion on Rewiring Democracy. It's our book that just came out from MIT Press. The reason we started writing it really stems from Bruce's last book. Bruce put out a book a couple years ago now called A Hacker's Mind that sort of interpreted a wide range of processes in society and in government and in politics from the point of view of hacking, the idea that you can follow the rules of a system while subverting their intent. And that shows up in so many different places. For example, Bruce, in your book, A Hacker's Mind, you gave the example of gerrymandering as sort of a human-developed hack of the rules around drawing political districts that has big implications for politics. And so just at the end of A Hacker's Mind, Bruce had written about what the future of hacking looks like and how it will change with AI. And the idea that in the future, it won't just be humans hacking these systems of government and politics, but AIs as well. And so we had met just when Bruce's book came out, and we started collaborating together to try and make real that idea, to explore what it would look like in reality of that idea of AIs being involved in hacking political systems. So we started thinking about all the current technologies of AI and machine learning. And by the way, this was back in 2020, and a lot's changed since then. But we started thinking about what the technologies of 2020 would look like if applied towards those ends of changing political systems. And of course, we thought about a lot of things that were disturbing, that represented real risks to democracy. But as we continued working on this together, what we found is that there's also a lot of opportunity. And we started seeing real world examples accelerating over these last couple of years where large language models, generative AI, and tools like ChatGPT have been so widely applied. We started seeing examples of people doing things that are also inspiring, also pointing to how democracy could be made better, and the interface between the public and our elected officials that represent us could be strengthened by applications of these new technologies. So in the book, we try and collect all of that. We try and go through how AI is today here in the US and around the world, transforming how people campaign for political office, how we operate the administration, the agencies of government and the executive branch, how we make law and policy in the legislative branch, how we operate courts in the judicial system, and, by the way, how all of us as citizens engage with our democracy, how AI is changing all of that. And we try and be realistic about all the risks involved in that. And I think, Emily, there are very good reasons for you and others to be cynical about how AI is having impacts today. But we also try and call out how it could be different and lessons we can learn from other democracies that are using and shaping the ecosystem of AI in different ways to try and call out what we could do as members of our democracy to try and steer towards a better path.
So we're really trying to separate the technology, what the technology can do, with the economics and business and what the companies are having the technology do. And I think a lot of what you see as the bad of AI is less the tech and more who is wielding the tech. And I think that's an important consideration we look at. How does power fit into this? AI is very much a power enhancing technology. In the hands of someone who wants better democracy, it will help with better democracy. In the hands of someone who wants less democracy, it will help with that as well. And also, we look at AI very generally. For most people, AI equals chatbots. It turns out that technology is just one piece of AI. There's a whole realm of predictive AI that doesn't do any chatting. The AI that is giving you turn-by-turn directions on your phone, for example, or is driving a car. It has its own risks, its own capabilities, but it is not generative. So when we look at the technology, those are the kinds of things we're looking at. And yeah, there are a lot of examples, both good and bad. We're trying to pull the good. We're trying to say, look, if you as a human want more democracy, here is how this technology can make government more responsive, how it can make the court system better, how it can help with the drafting and passing of laws. Now, the humans have to want that.
So, what do you think are some of the essential elements of making positive impact with AI for our government systems and our democratic societies?
Let me start with a couple. I think understanding how the AI fits into the human process. So, there are places where AI can replace humans, turn by turn directions, for example. There are places where it would augment humans. So, a human performing investigative and journalism might use AI to help look through a large amount of documents that would be impractical for the journalists to do that themselves. So, where it augments, where it replaces, I think it is important. How it makes mistakes and how those mistakes are found and corrected. Mistakes are not new. Any human will make mistakes, and we have lots of systems for humans making mistakes and correcting them. To the extent AI makes human-like mistakes, we're generally pretty good. To the extent where AI makes a different sort of mistakes, we would need different systems for finding and correcting them. Uh, and then how the system changes the underlying power dynamics. So in our book, we talk about several areas where adding AI doesn't just result in doing things faster or broader or more complex, but actually changes the thing itself. And those sorts of changes, and then when one group uses AI, another group uses AI, and how those changes interact with each other, those second order effects are often very hard to predict, but often the most consequential.
And I'll build on that last thing Bruce said to call out that we talk a lot about power dynamics in our book. And in democracies, a lot of the power dynamics are between the large number of us who are citizens of democracies and the small number of people that we elect and appoint to important official positions. And I think some of the most pro-democratic uses of AI that we collect in our book are those that change that power dynamic to give the people a little bit more power in that equation. So just to call out a couple examples, we talk about ways that AI can be used to strengthen the connection between constituents and their elected officials in policymaking to have their voices heard in a greater way. And even in the campaigning stage before that elected official takes office, we wrote in the book, and we've been continuing to follow and write about some innovation that's happening in Japan, where a candidate in a new political party is developing technologies and using AI to collect feedback from constituents at a massive scale, tens of thousands of really substantive, meaningful conversations about their policy platform, and then showing constituents if and when they take their feedback very directly and it manifests as a modification of the platform that party stands on and what they commit to doing and writing when they're in office. I think that's really kind of a new kind of politics that enables participation and public input at a scale that wasn't possible with previous technologies, and that's exciting. The other example I would give is in watchdogging the government and using technology to help citizens hold government accountable when it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. In the book, we wrote about an example from Brazil that's been operating for years. It actually predates by a long time the sort of modern technologies of large language models, but a group called, and a project called Operation Love Serenade in Brazil has been using machine learning tools to automatically monitor public expense reports of Brazilian officials to identify when there are expenses that don't follow the policy. Basically, when someone is using public funds for something that they're not supposed to use it for. And they've used this machine learning, this AI tool, to automatically flag those cases. And it's led to hundreds of official complaints that have addressed corruption in Brazil at a scale that, again, really wouldn't be possible for an individual citizen working with just their own time. But by augmenting those citizens' groups with technology and using AI in this productive way, they're able to do a better job providing oversight to government. So I found those examples that help citizens shift the power dynamics in their favor by using the technology to be the most inspiring.
Those are really cool examples of things that are happening right now, and I'm really curious as you have been taking in this information about what's going on right now, and I imagine that you are both fairly forward-thinking people. I'm curious what you're like most excited about or hopeful for, or what you've sort of dreamed might be possible maybe 5 or even 50 years from now using AI with democracy. Like go crazy.
You know, 50 years is hard. 5 years is actually hard. These technologies are changing so fast. I mean, even something like hallucinations, where most people's opinions were ossified 2 years ago, the reality is very different today. So it is hard to predict 5 years. It's impossible to predict 50 years. But when I think about the future trajectory, what gets me most excited is the fact that creating and using these models is becoming easier, cheaper, and much more environmentally friendly. So,
Mm.
this world where the technology is controlled by a few large tech billionaires, or a few US companies, a US China arms race, that these are, I think, very temporary state of affairs, and that we will be moving to a world where people will be building AIs and running them on their phones, on their computers. They won't be in these large data centers, where the models will be more agile, where we're going to break the monopoly and make this technology more generally available, more small d democratic. And I think that changes the economic environment, which will change the tech environment. And the fact that these AIs are overconfident, the fact that they're obsequious, the fact that they are built in these ways that benefit corporations are not inherent in the tech. They're corporate choices. And as this technology becomes cheaper and easier and more ubiquitous, different people will make different choices. And I think that's going to be really good for society and for democracy.
That's exactly where my mind went too. And as to the question of whether the kind of transformation that you're talking about looks more like 2 years or 50 years, we can look to global examples to give us some guidance on that. From the American context, where what we're seeing right now is just the explosive growth of the largest companies in the history of the world that are attaining that position by exploiting AI for their benefit right now. Companies that are getting multi-trillion dollar valuations on the backs of what they're doing with AI and how they're exploiting it in this capitalist context, that may feel insurmountable. That may feel like something I can never change or can only change on decades long timescales from the US perspective. But different countries are doing this differently. The example that we're most excited about right now comes from Europe. They have advanced the EU AI Act, and implementing that law has not been straightforward for them, but they're taking meaningful action to try and constrain corporate activity around AI. And in addition to that, they've gone beyond regulation. Countries like Switzerland have invested directly in developing AI models that are built for the public benefit with public funding and by publicly controlled institutions. Swiss universities have come together and used the Swiss National Supercomputing Center to develop the world's most advanced public AI model called Apertus. And they're not chasing the goal of super intelligent AI. They're not trying to have 1% better benchmarks on the ways that we evaluate LLM performance that outcompetes the biggest big tech companies. They have a fundamentally different set of incentives. They're trying to make something that is useful for Swiss institutions and Swiss users. So they've built smaller models that are more sustainable and that don't cost as much to develop. They haven't had to externalize some of the worst impacts of AI, for example, by stealing content to train their model, or by not accounting for the energy and environmental costs. By the way, the Swiss National Supercomputing Center that they use is powered by renewable energy, by hydropower. Instead, they're incentivized to create something into the public good. It's a fundamentally different way of building AI that may seem like it's decades away in the US, but we're seeing it happen already in other places around the world. And so I hope that's more like a 2-year transformation than a 50-year one.
I'm really glad to hear that there are solutions for using AI in sort of larger capacities, like you're saying, sort of this sort of Swiss countrywide, nationwide approach that is being more environmentally friendly, because that's another concern that I have is sort of at least from my perspective here in the US, the sort of utter disregard for our environment in favor of growing this industry has certainly added to my sort of feeling of cynicism.
And I expect that is going to change. And we saw that with search. It used to be much more environmental, I mean, it was more computationally intensive than it is today. People right now are running the Chinese model DeepSeek on their phones. It's
Hmm.
not fast, but it's being run on their phones. And as this continues, I think the environmental concerns largely, I don't want to say disappear, but get mitigated. I think they're caused right now by the companies making deliberate choices to pursue this moonshot arms race,
Mm.
and they don't have to.
I agree with everything Bruce said, and also I'll just point in the other, slightly more cynical direction too, just to call out how unfortunately widespread these environmental concerns are, and unfortunately not at all limited to AI. In fact, the transformation that's happened in our society over the past couple of decades, where we now all have these advanced supercomputers in our pockets, and by the way, most of us replace them every year, a couple of years. That unfortunately is an environmental disaster. The disposability of that tech, the amount of resources that go into the hardware manufacturing of that technology, in many ways, vastly outstrips the environmental concerns around AI today. And we didn't grapple with that decades ago in the way we should have. And I hope we won't make the same mistakes with AI.
One of the other things that I've thought about while reading this and thinking about sort of your optimism in bringing AI more forward in our democracy is this counteractive movement that I'm seeing going on to become more analog. And now, Bruce, knowing that you live in a house without a TV just has me like, I really want your thoughts on this, like the counterbalance of sort of moving forward fast with technology versus taking a step back and becoming more analog. And how do we sort of hold those two things? What are your thoughts on this movement to become more analog?
So I'm definitely not more analog. I mean, I
Mm.
don't have a television. I have screens, right? I spend most of my day staring at screens. I'm just not watching, I guess, I don't know, pre-scripted videos in an episodic manner. I'm just
Mm.
making this up. Uh, and so I think of it less as becoming more analog, as becoming more grounded in the real world. And I think a
Mm.
lot about that in terms of AI, how AI can help us be more present and more human. The app I always point to is Merlin. So Merlin is a phone app that listens to the ambient sounds and tell you what bird you're listening to. That is AI. That is 100% an AI application that makes me happier. That makes me
Mm.
happier in the real world. Right? It tells me the name of the bird I just heard. What could be more wonderful? So I actually think this technology, because it interfaces with people at the people level, you can talk to it in a human language. It can listen to birdsong. It actually takes us out of the computer interface, even though it is still a computer, even though it is still digital. So I like seeing those sorts of applications for AI.
I just have to say, I love the Merlin
I
app.
know it's fantastic.
I didn't think that I would at this time in my life, but I spent a lot of time with my dog at the park, and this past summer and spring I said, I don't see a lot of the birds that we're hearing, but I'm interested in getting better at understanding both when I see them and being able to identify them, but also to know what I'm hearing at the park and being able to be one of those people that's like, "Oh, I hear A house sparrow. I don't know what a house sparrow sounds like, so don't test me on that. But yeah, I really love that, and I love thinking about that as AI and technology that is supporting our sort of human, our very human existence. Sorry, Nathan, do you have other thoughts, please?
Oh, I just love that example of Merlin. I actually want to build on it with another app I hope you may have encountered called iNaturalist, which is an app that
No.
you can use to take a photo of any plant, creature in the world, and it will try and identify it for you in two ways. One is by using AI as a first pass. It analyzes that image, it tries to classify what you're looking at all the way down to the individual species level and the vast taxonomy of life. But the second way I just love is that it creates connections between people. They have a whole community on iNaturalist where someone else can look at that and try and help you clarify your classification, try and help you understand better what you're looking at. And it's got a vibrant community. Naturalists all around the world use it. And it's actually really useful for researchers too, because over time, over years, they built up this database of where people actually see different organisms in the wild and how that's changed over time. They can study things like migration patterns and changes in populations by looking at user data on this app. And I think it's just a great illustration of how you can apply technology, mobile technology, AI technology, in a way that's really pro-social. It advances science, it advances community. I'm inspired by that example and to think about what it could look like in politics and in democracy.
I love that so much. Okay, I have one other question for you that I have been sort of ruminating on. I'm curious if either of you have read the book Automatic Noodle.
Yes.
Okay, great. Bruce, stick with me on this one because I was thinking about the scenes in that book that happen when the robots are starting their restaurant and they want to make sure that they get a lot of traction. But because they're not human based, they have to it be for sort of secretive, right? And they use the platform that I can only liken to be like Grubhub for posting their things and getting orders. And essentially what it feels like is this AI or robots are have built this site, are using this site to pretend that they're not robots. And so as soon as people find out that they're robots, then they get bad reviews. And if you don't have good reviews, then you won't be part of the algorithm that brings you to the top that people order from your restaurant. And so in this sort of endless loop of computers engaging with computers, I was thinking about that in some of the examples that you've talked about, both in the book and in other conversations that I've heard you talk about, in the legal system where we have, or even thinking about job applications where people are using AI to build their resumes and their cover letters, and they're submitting them into these portals where AI is reading these cover letters and resumes. And so these two sort of competing computers are doing all of the work that used to be human work. And is that bogging down our systems? What does that all mean? And how do you grapple with and remain optimistic about how things that used to be very human to human might become very computer to computer? And what does that mean for us and society?
So actually, Nathan and I are writing about this right now, so we do have
Cool.
thoughts. But I do want to call out Annalee Newitz is the author of Automatic Noodle, which is a great kind of not really a short story. It's a little bit longer
Mhm.
about former military robots who were trying to set up a restaurant in war-torn San Francisco. Uh, right? It's science fiction. It's about robots. It's about general intelligence robots. But science fiction is actually never about the future. It's always about the present.
Mm.
So the book is about discrimination and bias, and what it means to be considered a person in society, and what happens when you are ostracized. Uh, and the book really addresses those issues, I think, really well. When you think about how AI is changing things, whether it be uh, job applications or students writing homework or letters to the editor of the newspaper. We do find that AI is making it easier for the humans to do the thing. Now, in some cases, that's good. I'm all in favor of assistive tech. If an AI will make you a more articulate citizen, writing to your legislator or writing to some public forum, that's great. If it's being used for an astroturfing campaign, that's bad. Right? This isn't anything different than before. We've had astroturfing campaigns. If it's helping you articulate your particular qualifications for a job better, that's good. If it helps you lie, that's bad. So we find that sort of in response, those on the receiving end of now is a more volume of input often has to use AI to sort. Right? So employers are using AI to sort through resumes, but they used to use keyword searches to sort through resumes. So again, these dynamics have all existed. I do think about what happens when the artificial takes over from the human. I think we're seeing that in social media, that a lot of the accounts are bots. Now, 5 years ago, they were probably paid trolls, and now, but that is scaling in a different way. Sometimes that'll be good, sometimes that'll be bad, and it's going to depend. Thinking about science fiction, there was a magazine, Clark's World, that a couple of years ago said we're turning off submissions because we're getting too many AI submissions. We're just people. We don't know how to wade through them all, and we're just going to accept submissions from people we trust. They've changed that. They now have a system where they think they can separate the two. But I think these dynamics are going to continue, and some will be good and some will be bad.
Well, maybe I can just add to that by sharing one of the stories that we've written about recently where this is happening in a democratic context, which is in Brazil. Brazil, maybe surprisingly, has one of the most litigious societies in the world. They have millions upon millions of court cases that they process through their system, maybe even a higher rate of people filing litigation than we have in the US. And they have seen this dynamic emerge over the past few years, where on the one hand, litigants are more and more often seen to be using AI assistive technologies to draft the documents associated with the case. And it's increased the rate at which cases are filed in an already overwhelmed system in Brazil. But at the same time, the Brazilian judiciary has been investing for years in using AI and machine learning technologies to process and triage that caseload. So what they're not using for AI for right now in any kind of explicit way is to make decisions about what outcomes are. But they are using it to try and make their processes faster. For example, a big fraction of the litigation in Brazil is targeted against the government, trying to hold the government accountable, and they spend an enormous fraction, I think, of order of percent of their GDP, paying out penalties when the government is found to be responsible in those cases. And they're using AI for purposes like making sure that their defense attorneys for the government spend their time on the most important cases where they can have the biggest impact. So that looks a little bit like robots talking to robots and this accelerating process where we have this unbelievable amount of litigation. And we have to follow this dynamics to see if the outcome of that is overall beneficial or not for society. Surprisingly, I think there is an argument to be made that it could be a good thing. Those robots talking to robots could be a good thing because government accountability proceeds in part through litigation. And if we can increase the capacity of the system to process those hopefully mostly legitimate complaints from citizens, that could be a good thing. And using assistive technologies to make that process work better could be a good thing. But these are new dynamics, and we want to watch further to see what happens in Brazil, and we hope we can learn some lessons to make the American judiciary and other systems better.
So I was just reading an article by a computer science professor who, like all professors, are finding that their students are using AI to do their homework and turning the projects in and not really knowing what they're doing. He found that the best way to uncover this is to ask the student questions about their assignment. And the student can't answer them. They obviously had the AI do it, and they don't deserve to pass. But that is actually time consuming, and his class was too big. So what he did is he set up an AI questionnaire. And as part of the assignment, the student would have to log into this AI and answer questions about the work they did. And he talks about the results. The results are generally the students hated it. They did not like to be quizzed in real time about their assignment, especially by an AI. But the students admitted that it was really good at assessing whether they knew the knowledge or not. So there's an example of an AI system trying to defend against an AI abuse. Now, the next step is there are programs, and if you don't know about this, you will be appalled, that will be on your computer listen in on a real-time Zoom conversation and suggest answers for you. And it is being used to have people lie through job interviews and sort of other real-time Zoom conversations. So here's an arms race that we're now seeing 3 different steps of. And I assume we're going to find soon, defenses against people using AI to prompt answers to questions they get live. And then this will continue, potentially indefinitely.
Years ago, my brother once told me, wouldn't it be so cool if there was an app on your phone that if you're like having a conversation with somebody that you just don't really want to listen to, you turn on the app and it sounds like you're answering them, and then later it'll just give you a summary of what they said so that you don't actually have to have this conversation with them. And I was like, I don't think that that's cool, but I think that maybe we're getting there.
You should tell him that dystopia has arrived.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much both for engaging some of my theoretical and existential questions and cynicism about AI. It's been really lovely. And we're going to wrap up our show now with a segment that we call The Last Chapter, where we talk about a library or bookish related question, just to bookend our episodes with books. And so I thought, and I'm excited, Bruce, to hear your thoughts on this as somebody who reads science fiction. I would ask you today, what is a fictional world or environment that you would like to visit or live in?
Oh, wow, I'm terrible at these kind of questions.
Would you like to live in Automatic Noodle or visit?
I mean, Automatic Noodle is a post-apocalyptic world where California fought a war against the United States. It is not a nice place to live.
I don't disagree with you. I do think that the restaurant sounded very good, but yeah.
The restaurant sounded good, but because you had a robot that was actually really good at hand-pulled Chinese noodles.
Yeah.
But this is why they call it science fiction.
I'll give you the most basic answer as a less well-read science fiction fan than both of you. I'm really attracted to the Star Trek universe and just the idea that we can reach a post-scarcity economy, the idea that we can have cooperation not only internationally but even intergalactically as well. And there are lots of aspects of where that goes wrong that are depicted in the Star Trek universe, but just the idea that it's possible and that we can have that kind of cooperation, I think, is inspiring. That's a universe I'd like to spend some time in.
It's interesting that they really postulated a post-scarcity universe, but because science fiction is never about the future, about the present, they couldn't make it accessible. So when they invented the Ferengi, they invented lanthanum, right? They invented a scarce metal that this culture could covet and trade, because it's really hard for people for us living in society to really imagine society being so different. And of course, transporters were invented because they didn't have the budget to have shuttles going up and down from planets back to the starship. So that was done for purely economic studio reasons.
That I am a child of I'm sure I'm much younger than the two of you. I'm a child of the 90s, where the popular Disney movie Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century, she lives on a space station up in space. It's pretty much the International Space Station. It's not that fancy, I don't think, in reality, but I think that would be kind of cool to be able to visit that, not just a space station right now that is primarily for research, but one in which people actually live. It's kind of like a cruise ship in the space. Would be kind of cool.
I suppose I could mention Victoria Goddard. I don't know if people have read her. She writes a fantasy world, which is basically about good government. That is a fine world to be in. Right? In the book, one of the key plot points is instituting universal basic income. And this is a book with, magic and wizards and things.
The only thing I'll add is that my career in science started in astronomy, and all my academic training is in astrophysics. And it's just amazing how many people, especially at the undergraduate and graduate student level, will tell you that they entered that field because of science fiction and by seeing some of these depictions of what the future can look like and what it looks like to try and understand the universe when you've got much more advanced technology. So I think the kinds of depictions that you're talking about, especially Emily, the example like you shared, where you can kind of see yourself represented in that future, I think are so powerful, so important for our culture, so important for the scientific enterprise too.
And that gets back to Star Trek, which put a woman of color on the bridge of the Enterprise. And that was a really big deal in the 1960s.
Absolutely.
On that note, I think we can wrap our whole episode. Thank you both so much for your time today and for talking with me and sharing your thoughts with our guests.
Pleasure to join you. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for everybody for listening. If you'd like to respond to our last chapter question and tell us about an environment or world that you would like to visit or live in, you can reach out to the show and send us an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at overdoingitpod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help us reach more Rhode Islanders. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and is brought to you by the library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine.
Wait, I just got the joke. Overdoing it. Library. Yes.
Yes.